Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Times Northern sports correspondent Martin Hardy. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the Back Pages, starting with The Guardian, and they lead with Aston Villa losing 3-1 at Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. The headline, Villa feel PSG's force. They also have the Liverpool story. Salah closes in on new Anfield contract, and they carry the latest on Liam Delap's future as well. Chelsea and United target Delap's release clause. The inside pages of the Telegraph Sports section focus on the war of words between Nemanja Matic and Andre Onana ahead of Lyon against Manchester United in the Europa League. And the Times back page, they also lead with Aston Villa. The headline, Villa undone by PSG brilliance. They also have an interesting revelation from Rory McIlroy, who says he has tried hypnosis as he looks to win the career Grand Slam at the Masters. Miguel and Martin, good evening to you both. Let's start with the game in Paris. Aston Villa beaten by 3-1 in the Champions League quarter-final first leg. Miguel, how tough to take is that last goal for Unai Emery's side?
Yeah, I mean, that was it. Like, at 2-1, I thought Villa were mostly very disciplined. It was a very difficult game. And 2-1 was a sort of scoreline you can take back and really give it a go. 3-1, given especially the threat of PSG in the break, it feels like it's more than an extra goal disadvantage. It just kind of further skews the tie. And I have to say, though, it was like no more than PSG deserved. They were superb tonight. There is a wider context there, obviously, in the way that I mean, like Villa they're fighting on 3 fronts with the FA Cup. They've done really well to get this far, and also they're in such a kind of a brutal battle for 4th and 5th, you'd say, in the Champions League, given how tense the Premier League. Whereas PSG, due to their ownership and the massive advantage they have over the rest of France, have once again kind of just won the league in an absolute canter. And that will make a difference, especially on nights like tonight. But other than in terms of the goals, they fully maximised that difference. I mean, they were superb, PSG, really. It wasn't just the way they kind of penned Villa in, but also just the individual quality of that attack and the way suddenly they can go from that pressing to this individual inspiration. Like, Kvaratskhelia goal is, I think, one of the best I've seen in the Champions League this season.
Yeah, and we saw a couple of crackers last night, so that just shows how good it was. Martin, did Villa do well to even just stay with PSG for the majority of that game, hanging on to their coattails?
I think we're looking at the best team in Europe and possibly the best team in the world at the minute. So yes, to have made it within 90 seconds, as Miguel says, of getting that 2-1, they did very well. But it could and should have been a lot more. Don't let anybody kid you that 3-1 was harsh on Aston Villa. 75% possession of PSG, 29 shots to 7, 11 on target of 2, and a good stat is 58 touches from PSG in the Aston Villa box to 9 the other way around. 9 saves from Emi Martinez to 1 from Donnarumma. And this real emergent team in PSG that are just incredible to watch, full of quality. The goals kind of characterise that. Doué scores a world-class goal. Kvaratskhelia scores a world-class goal. Then they've got Vitinha, Nuno Mendes scores a world-class goal, Barcola, Zaire Emery. They built this incredible team, and Luis Enrique has got them playing complete front foot football. Wide players prepared to take the fullbacks on. Aston Villa played most of the night in a very deep 5-4-1 formation just to try and take up some of the space. But PSG are relentless, and that third goal, if you watch the celebrations from Enrique on the sideline when the goal went in, and then when the full-time whistle went, he understood straight away the significance of that third goal and just the fact that it now puts the impetus on Villa. I can't see a game of football I can't see the return game at Villa Park where PSG don't score, and that means there's a pressure on Aston Villa to score at least 3 goals to take this tie at extra time. It means you're going to leave gaps, and they're so fast in transition, so fast with their forward play. They're clever. They've kind of shaken away from the model they had about 2 or 3 years ago, which didn't work. They now look the team to beat, and probably, I know it's difficult for Villa fans to see the late goal, but probably emerging with a 3-1 defeat is the best they could have hoped for, because there was a big gulf between the sides in terms of quality, no matter how much energy and tactical nous there was from Unai Emery.
Yeah, the Mail going with Villa's Euro hopes hanging by a thread. If we rewind to the first half, there was a great moment where Aston Villa took the lead. Morgan Rogers, whose stock continues to rise this year, playing under Unai Emery. Can Villa take heart, Miguel, from the way they managed to open up PSG in that one moment?
I have to say, at that point in the game, especially when the goal goes in, you're thinking this is going to be the sort of performance on which Emery has made his reputation, really, especially with those 4 Europa League wins. He is a bit of a specialist for these European ties. He has almost that kind of old Rafa Benitez or Jose Mourinho capacity for coming up for a game plan for an individual game that kind of can react to the opposition and like really kind of do a number on them. And for a good 35 minutes, it looked like that was possible. PSG just overwhelmed, I suppose, given there is a kind of superiority of resources there and talent. And the one thing for the second leg, though, is obviously, I mean, at 2-1, maybe they could have gone for a similar sort of approach. But as Martin said there, they have to come out. Like, I mean, it's a 2-goal gap now. Suddenly, I mean, to set up in a similar sort of way, in a way you maybe would expect from Emery in this sort of game, they're going to need a bit more, and this is going to be one of his biggest tests in Europe, because it is something missing in his CV in that sense. He's only had one Champions League run really with Villarreal, which was very impressive given they knocked out Bayern Munich, but they won the first leg there, and in this case they're 3-1 behind now. They're going to need something very different.
Yeah, the Sun, we just saw it a moment ago, bad air day. If Prince William fancies a change of career, I think he'd make an excellent football pundit. I don't know whether you saw his interview pre-game. But Martin, what confidence can you give Aston Villa fans that are looking ahead to the second leg? Can you give them any shred of confidence going into that second leg that there could be something remarkable? I mean, look at the history of PSG in the Champions League. They have had a tendency to throw things away when things have looked like it was going to go their way.
Look, I'm sure we may talk about Arsenal as well. Both games are at half-time. Anything can still happen. Villa Park will be raucous like nobody will have seen for decades. Will that intimidate the PSG players? We wait and see. Aston Villa themselves have got real speed on the break. Rashford is continuing to flourish. Does Ollie Watkins come back in the frame? And you mentioned there Morgan Rogers is one of the real stories of the season in terms of this attacking midfielder who just always has an eye to score goals now. So they will think one goal, this tie's back alive. They just, unfortunately for them, they're coming up against such a strong PSG. But as you've said, PSG have had problems in this competition, and there is a huge pressure on Luis Enrique and this football club to win the Champions League, especially now as they are the favourites to go and do it. That brings a different kind of pressure. We'll see how these young players react. Aston Villa are still in the tie, but they're playing against such a young team that doesn't seem to have any fear in it. My money is still very much on PSG, but Unai Emery will be working through something to kind of drag Aston Villa back alive and into that night. It may be that he says, look, just keep it tight and keep it 0-0 at half time. We're 2 goals behind going into the second half. We may fancy that. The big problem they've got, as I highlighted there by the statistics, PSG just absolutely dominate you in terms of their offense. So it's very difficult to see how you're going to stop them from scoring a goal.
Well, it's Southampton at the weekend for Aston Villa before the return leg at Villa Park on Tuesday evening. Lots of the back pages as well talking about developments at Liverpool and the contract situations involving Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold, the Mail's back page. Salah's staying. This is the growing confidence that Mohamed Salah and Virgil van Dijk will sign on again at Liverpool. Miguel, I guess is 2 out of 3 the best case scenario? If it seems now that Real Madrid increasingly confident that Trent Alexander-Arnold will move to Real Madrid in the summer from Liverpool, is 2 out of 3 the best case scenario for Liverpool? Yeah,
I think this has been the direction of travel. Really almost go as far back as the start of the season. Now, it hasn't always been a straight direction of travel, especially in the last few weeks, when suddenly there was almost a bit more kind of doubt about it, especially with Van Dijk's public comments around the PSG game. Salah is obviously in the whole Salah camp, but it's almost felt like they were constantly creating a little bit of energy to the situation, shall we say. But the one thing with Salah is there was never actually any sense that he really wanted to go. I mean, like the message, every time you read between the lines, was he wanted to stay at Liverpool. We knew there was a massive offer from Saudi Arabia. I think it was from Al Hilal. Paris Saint-Germain well, actually, funny enough, those at Paris Saint-Germain would say actually they were never that interested in Salah because they don't sign players at that age group now. But a lot of people felt there was a potential offer there. But Salah, there was never an indication that he wanted. He wanted to stay at Liverpool. He wants to win. He wants to win the Champions League again. He wants to keep winning trophies. And does feel like, despite this obviously coming down to a lot of discussion about money, he's got a lot of affiliation with this club, understandably so, given what he's done there and what he's won there. And the Van Dijk one, I think, it almost felt like that was almost in the background compared to the noise about the other two, even though he's obviously arguably a more influential player than both. Again, I say arguably. But yeah, I think that was always the expectation as well, other than that one time when Van Dijk himself said there was no movement. Well, it looks like there's very much movement now.
Yeah, Martin, how pivotal was this for Richard Hughes in that sporting director job? Look, people have been talking about a potential rebuild in the summer for Liverpool. Do these new contracts negate the need for a major surgery in the summer at Liverpool?
Yeah, well, we're talking about a team that's probably going to win the Premier League at a canter, that are going to lose Trent, that would be prepared to sell Darwin Núñez. Diaz could go. If you were going to put Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah into that sale as well, you're talking about half the team disappearing, which would have been strange given the fact that they are significantly better than anybody this season. So I think they had to be careful with who they lost. You go back to November, Mo Salah give the quote of "I'm more out than in," so he has been prepared to play the game on this one. As Miguel said, Virgil van Dijk has been so imperious at the back that his signature to stay feels as important in terms of offensive solidity, that the example he gives to the club, just how good defensively they are. And, he's still at the age of 33 amongst the best central defenders in Europe. So both players staying feels like a massive boost for Liverpool. And I'm sure they will take it as a step forward. It's something that sets them up nicely for next season. They still, if they do sell Darwin Núñez as we think, and there was an approach to him in January, they still need a centre forward, which they will feel they can buy to make this team even better. It still has elements of being Jurgen Klopp's players and Arne Slot's style. So perhaps we'll see players that perhaps match more what he wants from them as it moves forward.
Yeah, certainly seems like it's set up for the summer. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's papers, including this in the Telegraph, that extraordinary spat between Nemanja Matic and Andre Onana. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and a warm welcome back to the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the Times Northern sports correspondent Martin Harty. Let's go to the Telegraph. Inside their sports section, they are talking about the quite extraordinary news conference given by Nemanja Matic, who's embroiled himself in a war of words with the Manchester United goalkeeper Andre Onana. It followed an interview given by Onana where he said that United were way better than Lyon on paper, and Matic hit back and said, if you are one of the worst goalkeepers in Manchester United's history, you need to take care of what you are talking about. Now, I guess we must give credit to Simon Peach of the Press Association, who asked the question of Matic and did give the whole thing in context and said, he did say, you're a good team, it's going to be a tough game, but then he said, United are way better than Lyon on paper. So in kind of the first bit of the question, it was, you're all right. The second bit of the question was quite extraordinary. So, Miguel, what did you make of it all?
It's, as you say, it's extraordinary. It's almost like trash talking before a prize fight. And also something that feels actually a bit out of kilter with the modern game, the extent of media training we know players have. And yeah, not just a prize fight, but like something out of the 1970s, the sort of thing that, Clough and Rivy would have got themselves involved in. I can't remember too many modern games where players have gone at each other in this way. And that sense now where you're going to be watching the match and A, wondering how kind of Onana is going to respond to this, B, watching is there going to be any flashpoints between them, because there's so much potential for this now to pop off. And it's incredible. I mean, talking about media training, Onana's initial comment about how we're way better, that's actually quite unusual. There's usually much more respect about when teams talk about each other, especially in Europe. Although, as you say, and as Simon pointed out to Nemanja Matic, he did caveat it. Oh, so, I mean, that was striking enough. But then for Matic to go from that to The extent of the comment, one of the worst goalkeepers in Manchester United's history. Not even he's a bit questionable, ratting like that. Yeah, it's it certainly added a lot of colour to this.
Martin, when you're in a press conference like that and you get a player who gives you an answer like that, are you tapping everybody next to you in the press conference going, did he say that? Are your eyes lighting up in the room there?
Yeah, that definitely does happen. I was at the Joe Kinnear press conference in Newcastle when he went bananas, and as soon as it starts, everybody kind of is on red alert that this is something unusual. To me, this symbolises the decline of Manchester United. Nemanja Matic, a centre midfielder who shuffled round Old Trafford with his best years at Chelsea behind him, slagging off a goalkeeper in Onana who is, as he correctly says, way down the list of great goalkeepers. Leon fifth against Manchester United that aren't even the top 10 in Europe's second tier competition, arguing about who's the worst. Nothing kind of characterises the decline of Man United more than this. And it feels to me, it should be the starting block for everybody to go, right, we've got a lot wrong here. This is not what should be happening. Onana should not be arguing with Matic about who had the worst time at Old Trafford. And Onana has his 2 cup wins in his back pocket. Matic in 5 years didn't win everything. Information that we are now kind of the other person is pointing at the other person. So yeah, it doesn't look great, but it's great copy. It's great colour. It actually makes the game much more interesting than it would have been to start with. But as I said, Nemanja Matic shuffling around the midfield for Man United, to me, kind of symbolised their decline and their fall backwards. And that was, when did he join? 2017. I don't actually think they've turned that around since then. And him picking fights with a Man United goalkeeper is extremely amusing before a game, but it does tell you that this is a club in fall.
Certainly adds a bit of spice, as you say, ahead of this Europa League tie. Let's reflect a little bit more on the Champions League, because obviously it was a terrific night for Arsenal at home against Real Madrid. They are in full control of that quarter-final tie against Real Madrid. And Miguel, in your paper, The Independent, there you've written about the 3 words that inspired Arsenal's greatest Champions League night. Tell us what they were.
Make it happen. Arteta said it 3 times after the game, and apparently said it a lot more beforehand. I think that's probably one of the biggest things about this match from Arsenal, because this wasn't a kind of a tight tactical victory. They completely overwhelmed Real Madrid in the way that actually I suppose some of Arteta's best teams have done over the past 3 years, and actually something he's been criticised for losing. And I think, look, from speaking to people around Arsenal, trying to kind of put that game in context, one of the big things was about how, say, when they played Bayern Munich last season, the first time they've been in the quarterfinal in almost 20 years, there was a sense of a nervous tension around the team, that they kind of didn't quite feel like they were ready for the level yet. It was all psychological. There was an aspect of playing the badge. They had to go through that. And before this game, there was absolutely none of that. And I suppose it is all about that kind of conviction that Arteta has sought to distill. And that is actually one reason, say, and I mentioned this in the piece, why he doesn't necessarily sign certain strikers that people outside would expect, because it's all about kind of conditioning the right mentality in the group. Everyone has this singular focus, and I think that was distilled in a performance like this. The only caveat, I suppose, as I do say at the end of the piece, is they're now going to the club who, probably more than any other in Europe, believe they can overturn any situation in their own stadium. So in maybe a quarterfinals where it does feel like 3 of the 4 ties are quite lopsided, there's maybe the most intrigue about that, because the big test for Arsenal, and the big psychological test, is whether they can withstand the force of Madrid, because this is where that aura, and I mentioned that kind of aspect in the piece a lot, that's where it really comes into play.
Yeah, and the Telegraph talk about what Arsenal thought about Declan Rice and his set-piece prowess. They said that Arsenal always knew that Rice could be a free-kick king. I don't know how they knew that when he'd not scored a direct free kick in his whole senior career, but there you go. Martin, what about Declan Rice and that performance and those free kicks?
There was a podcast in about a year or two ago that I caught Mark Noble talking about Declan Rice when he was at West Ham. And he said Joe Hart was a pretty intimidating goalkeeper, and if you took the mickey out of him, he would chase you around the London Stadium and try and half kill you. And this is Martin Noble, just dropped it in there. He said Declan Rice is a beautiful striker of the ball. He can absolutely ping it. So I kind of sat in the back of my mind. He then went on to say that they were doing free kicks, and Declan Rice put one past Joe Hart from 25 yards and said, pick that out. And Joe Hart said, if you do that again, I'll come after you. So Declan Rice did exactly the same thing, pinged it in the top corner, took the mickey out of him, and was chased into the dressing room by a furious Joe Hart. That stuck in my mind that this is a player that can strike the ball really well. The problem that he has had is that we didn't know if he was a sitting midfielder. We didn't know if he was the pivot that England needed. We didn't know if he was a number 8. He has to then listen to Graham Souness and Roy Keane saying he needs to score 10 goals a season. So we're kind of asking him to do a bit of everything. Last night, what you saw was part of the quality that he can bring to the pitch and why it costs so much money. 2 brilliant strikes that, make Arsenal the favourites now go through against all expectations to beat Real Madrid. But he is capable of this kind of thing. It's just kind of deciding what we want from him that will be the hard part. And maybe Thomas Tuchel will define that in the next 18 months. But yeah, a brilliant night for him and a brilliant night for Arsenal, as Miguel has eloquently put there.
And lots of the papers as well on the eve of the Masters looking at Rory McIlroy's chances of the career Grand Slam at Augusta. Rory has revealed that he's tried hypnosis in his bid to win that elusive green jacket. That's been reported by the Times. Miguel, what do you make of his chances? He says he's never been more confident going into the Masters. Can he back it up this week?
Well, it's funny, we've talked about psychology a lot today on the show. And I suppose this is never more evident here, especially that point about hypnosis. It indicates someone, looking to get into that right mindset. And obviously, as much as anything, results help. Like, having spoken to the guys on my desk who do golf,
it's an old thing. It was the...
Carry on, Miguel. Carry on. We just had your microphone there.
Sorry, yeah, this massive upturn in form. He's won the Players. He's won in Houston. And given the kind of this noise around his career since his last major, it's hard to remember when there was such a kind of an air of serenity around McIlroy. And obviously, yeah, hypnosis is just an element of that. But I think the willingness to even try that displays that sort of mindset as well. It's not kind of a desperate last chance. It's about kind of honing final details.
It certainly will be interesting to see how Rory gets on. It's live for you across the Sky Sports platforms, the Masters. Just got time to mention the back page of the Eye, where they talk about Newcastle and the future of Alexander Isak. Toon, Price, Liverpool and Arsenal out of Isak moved. Just your thoughts on the future of Alexander Isak, Martin, just briefly.
Well, the fee's been mentioned before, the 150 million. I don't think anybody now in European football is going to pay 150 million pounds for a player. Alexander Isak's lot is rising. It was his agent that kind of stalled the talks with Newcastle last summer in terms of a new deal. They have said, and Newcastle said they will sit down in the summer. It may depend if Newcastle reach the Champions League, but inside of Alex, and the betting would probably be just towards Alexander Isak staying. But at the same time, this is a player with ambitions. He has 1 Champions League goal, Mbappe has 53, and Erling Haaland has 48. He will want Newcastle to be competitive. Them guarantees are given. Perhaps we'll wait and see how this plays out, but nobody's going to pay £150 million. But it's whether or not the player expresses his desire to leave at any point, which he hasn't done at all yet so far. OK, thanks very much, Miguel. Martin, thanks for your time. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see back pages tonight at hour. And the show's also available as a podcast. Download it wherever you get your pods. And join us again on Thursday night when our guests will be The Guardian's Jonathan Liu and ESPN's Mark Ogden.